With the release of Amphorius' trailer, my mind has been rushing to unimaginable speeds. Because you mean to tell me we get to have space Greek mythology as a planet? Sign me up, because my hyperfixation and obsession over gods, deities, heroes, and much more is truly returning to me faster than my Stellar Jades will drop the moment that Fugue releases. That being said, for as hype as I am about us traveling to a new planet, this also made me reminisce about the past of Star Rail. Like, look at it. We are one patch away, once the next one releases, from version 3.0. And soon after that, we're gonna get the anniversary, and I know that it's like 5 months until that happens, but it's crazy how many adventures we have gone through, and the fact that the developers have made every patch feel meaningful to a certain extent. I know that this doesn't apply for every single player, but to me, every single one has been meaningful and active, and I've been enjoying logging into the game to do different little things from, like end game content, Swarm Disaster, Simulated Universe, etc., etc. It's been lovely. Because of this, I wanted to make this video as a sort of retrospective about Honkai Star Rail's release, and I want to look back onto the past just to see how much the game has changed since the beginning. Because legitimately speaking, with the amount of changes that they have done and all the content that they have added, it really does feel like they have created a new game with everything that they have built up on. As previously stated, this video will only cover patch 1.0 of the game because otherwise we will take ages to make this. And trust me, I know I yap way too much, and therefore I must limit myself. I definitely will do more videos like these for other patches, as well as the characters, because it is so fun to go back through memory lane, at least to me. And because of this, I want to warn you that this video is probably going to be a little bit biased, because some of these things are going to be based on my own experience. So please do make sure to drop down in the comments what you actually think about some of the characters that we're going to be talking about, in regards to, your experiences, or whether or not you agree or disagree with me to some of these things that I'm going to say throughout this video. So, with all that being said, let us dive in and see everything about Honkai Star Rail's release patch. I want to start off this video by talking very briefly about the storyline in the release patch, because I do feel like it is very important for them to have done a good job in order to actually retain their player base, because this is the first impression to the game, and if you flop your first impression, then there really is no way for you to recover that certain fan base that already gave it a try and disliked it. And as a whole, I do genuinely think that they freaking killed it. The fact that we started off the game with Kafka and Silverwolf as the playable characters that don't exist in the game at the current moment when we were playing it, definitely helped the game build up some hype and allowed players to remain just to see how the characters would be when they released, if anything, if they some people are into the meta like that. So I do find that the introduction for the game was really cool, as well as the fact that we got to learn all the game mechanics, well, the basic game mechanics, before we actually became the Trailblazer and got to play as the character that represents ourselves. We got to experience the storyline at the Herta space station, which one of the most memorable things that I remember still was, one, the scene where we seen the nuke, when I believe it was when we first awakened. And the other one was when Welt taps us in the forehead, because I think that we were about to explode because the Stellaron became unstable. Those were really good introductions to the game. Afterwards, we moved to Jarilo VI, where I genuinely believe was the moment that the story went to its peak. During our time there, the main thing that I loved that was being highlighted was the complete difference in lifestyles that we see from people living in the overworld in areas such as the Belobog administrative district versus how people live in the underworld, such as places like the Vagrant Camp or even just Boulder Town that have been more heavily affected and were more so used to siphon resources to feed those on the overworld. In all honesty, this might also be the Arcane speaking with me, but yeah, like as you guys probably know, Arcane Season 2 came out, and I've been obsessed with that as well. So yeah, there's a lot of biases going in there. Not that they weren't there before, because I also play League of Legends, but I don't know, just disregarding all that, the whole concept and storyline that they had, I just absolutely loved it, and I'm just happy that that existed and I got to live through it. But getting back on topic, there were a lot of amazing scenes throughout Belobog. In particular, the highlight of the Belobog storyline has got to be our journey to fighting Cocolia. Because not only do we learn about Serval and her past with Cocolia, we also get to fight Gepard and have a nice bonding moment between both siblings. We get to fight Cocolia's ghost or shadow, I forgot, like an echo, which was really cool to see. And then, as a whole unit and group, with Bronya, Seele, March 7th, Don Hong, and the Trailblazer, we unite to go in the fight against Cocolia. And that whole scene was absolutely beautiful, which does end, if I recall correctly, on us getting stabbed, which is a little bit of a rough moment. But that being said, that is when we awaken the power of the preservation. And that scene was epic, because it was also followed up by Wildfire, which is honestly not my favorite battle music OST, but it is a sick song. It leads to an amazing boss fight. It genuinely gets you all hyped up, and after you defeat Cocolia, the climax of the story is just beautiful. I just realized how much I've been speaking, so to cut things short, since the Xianzhou story kind of got cut off halfway, I'm not gonna go too much in detail on it. It was fun-ish. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it, because like I did enjoy some parts. It was really cool to have the double perspective of what was going on with the Trailblazer in March 7th versus what was Don Hong doing this whole time. There's also the fact that we had the whole storyline with Kafka and Blade having infiltrated into Xianzhou, and Kafka trying to help out Blade so that they know that they got the wrong person incarcerated, as well as just Luocha. Luocha being revealed ahead of his time again when we were playing as Don Hong was such a cool detail. Especially because while you were playing as Don Hong and Sushang in that part of the story, you don't really have a healer. So having him be there and be really effective was a really nice touch for, you know, keeping people excited. But as much as I would like to praise the story of the Xianzhou at this current point in time, I really can't, and I hate that I can't. Main reason is the whole Sanctus Medicus storyline, which from what I recall, they kind of removed that, so it's now part of a world quest instead of the Trailblaze mission, which I think it was the right play to do, because there was like a moment that was a little bit too stale of you just doing like a fetch quest versus Sanctus Medicus. So yeah, like I genuinely speaking did not enjoy that. Everything else though was pretty good. They could have made the narrative go a little bit faster, but again, I don't really remember everything in detail from this, which honestly goes to show how much better Belobog was to have for me to have it almost all memorized as opposed to the Xianzhou story. So yeah, that was not like the best way to end the patch, but like they definitely did good overall, I believe. So with all that being said, let us actually go through the characters, and oh boy, I know this will take forever, so I apologize in advance. The Trailblazer, following the path of destruction. Combat type, or as I much prefer saying, Element, physical. Role, DPS. Rules are made to be broken. The Trailblazer is the very first character that we unlock, and in all honesty, they absolutely did a beautiful job with this character in particular, because not only were they very fun in the story because they gave us very enjoyable dialogue options, but at the same time, gameplay-wise, they were just perfect for beginners. Being able to use two different kinds of ults, depending on whether or not you want to do massive single target damage or moderate blast damage, was a really good addition to have for the main character, especially because this is going to be the character that you're going to use for the very beginning of the game and that you're going to try to use as much as possible because, it's free and you usually get free eidolons with it too. Additionally, a lot of the enemies in the early game have physical weakness, which makes the transition from the early game into the mid game a lot smoother, and it really does help the player feel like the character that they are playing as is actually relevant, which I feel like is one of the best things that they could have done for the very beginning of the game. March 7th, following the path of preservation, element, eyes, gameplay, shielder, the best guide in Star Rail. The second character that we obtained throughout our trailblazing journey. In all honesty, March 7th was pretty good during the late game. While she does fall off later in the game because you need better forms of sustain and enemies start doing more AoE attacks, she really did amazing during the time that she was meant to shine. Being able to shield allies and draw aggro away from Dan Heng was one of the best things in the world. Being able to counterattack always felt relatively rewarding. And just as a whole, March 7th, I want to argue, is the mascot of Star Rail, given the fact that she's in a lot of promotional content and even is the literal icon of the app. I don't know, just keeping her around always felt like something that I had to do, and it was genuinely enjoyable because she was part of our journey while we were traveling. And just as a whole, being able to freeze enemies, although now in the late game is kind of irrelevant, back then it really did mean something. Being able to prevent an enemy from attacking you and keeping your health safe when we didn't have a healer yet was so crucial, and I genuinely did adore that very much. Dan Heng, following the path of the hunt. Element, wind. Role, DPS. Called Dragon Young. Dan Heng was the third character that we received during the story, and in all honesty, he was a lot of fun. I genuinely enjoyed using him, especially because he was set up to be the true source of damage from the team, while the Trailblazer did reasonable amounts of damage and was there to reliably clear certain little mobs of enemies. Dan Heng truly was pulling his weight by being the one that executed large-scale enemies, and genuinely that made me always so happy to be using him. Also, this is a little bit of bias, but I genuinely adore his ultimate. From the very beginning, I think that was also one of the things that hooked me into continue playing Dan Heng specifically, because he has these sort of colors of black that look like ink whenever he uses his ultimate, and that is just absolutely beautiful. It's gorgeous. So just because it was visually satisfying, I just had to continue playing him, especially because as a whole, the animation, even though it's relatively short, it always just is stunning. There's like the whole like red tree leaves and that sort of calm atmosphere before that hit that he does. So yeah, I don't know, just needed to mention that. Oh, and also he was like a really nice excuse for players to be using a harmony unit or some sort of unit that helped buff your team, because I still remember one of the main things, even though I knew nothing about the game, for some reason, when you use, I think it's one of his like traces, when you target Dan Heng with an ally ability, he gets a wind resistance shred, which is honestly really good. Hence why I was using Dan Heng all the time, especially with the character that is coming up next. Asta, following the path of the harmony. Element, fire. Role, support. Mona, if her reckless spending didn't actually put her in credit card debt. Asta is, technically speaking, the fourth party member that we received because she was given to us by a guaranteed warp at the very beginning of the game. And in all honesty, I genuinely adored playing with Asta throughout the very beginning of the game. Even though I didn't understand how her stacks work, I'm gonna be completely transparent on that. The main thing is, and this is probably just my RPG goblin brain speaking, her ultimate gives a speed buff, and that alone to me sounded absolutely busted. Also, as stated before, Asta being able to buff up Don Hung and allow him to get that wind defense shred was always really clutch for me, so I have fond memories of using this character. I also do remember Asta being one of the characters that almost everybody had built and showcased back in the day, in particular because, you know, it's a harmony unit, it's meant to buff up your entire party, and legitimately speaking, because we had only 3 harmony units back then, having Asta in the team just meant that you can do the most amount of damage per screenshot with a specific character. So she was used in so many showcases, like everywhere. It was literally just her, Bronya, Tingyun, and their DPS flavor of choice. Serval, following the path of erudition. Element, lightning. Role, DPS and wave clearer. Guitar sound effect. Serval, technically speaking, the 5th character that you could potentially get for free back in the day, in particular because we were able to get Serval if you had done the pre-registration for the game. And in all honesty, getting Serval early in the game was pretty decent. She is the very first erudition unit that we get throughout the game, if I recall correctly, and for the most part, she allows us to clear just the regular mob encounters that are in the overworld decently effectively. Although I will admit, she wasn't used immediately, mainly because when we first get her, there aren't any electric weak enemies right off the bat. We first go through a little bit of Jarilo VI, and then when we go into the underworld, it's when we start seeing a lot of, not necessarily a lot, but like a decent amount of electric weak enemies, mainly in the form of the robots, and being able to fast clear them was really good. On top of that, I will admit there's 2 things that I am very biased towards from this. She was amazing against Mr. Svarog, because Mr. Svarog liked to summon a lot of little units, and on top of that, there was also the fact that she is able to restore her ultimate very effectively. I don't know how and I don't know why, but I remember spamming the hell out of Serval's ultimate, so being able to just clear a lot of enemies that way felt really nice. Herta, following the path of erudition. Element, ice. Role, DPS? Question mark? Have you done your simulated universe yet? We get Herta through the simulated universe, and then we get another one, and another one, and another one. Yeah, we used to get a lot of copies from Herta in every single simulated universe world that was getting released. And in all honesty, it was nice rewards, but even though everybody had essentially like an E4 to E6 Herta, nobody used her. And that might just blow the mind of some people, but yeah, Pure Fiction, which is Herta's best game mode, didn't exist. So there really was no sense or purpose to be using this character. Everybody considered Herta to be a D tier character and legitimately one of the worst units in the entire game. The only real highlight I can say about Herta back in this patch is the fact that we could see her puppets everywhere throughout Herta Space Station, and that she is the one in charge of the simulated universe, that therefore it gave her some sort of like weight to the person that she was. But beyond that, yeah, there was really nothing else to talk about. She just was pretty bad due to the circumstances of there not being content tailored for her character. Natasha, following the path of the abundance. Element, physical. Role, healer. Grenade launcher doctor. Oh boy, back to simpler times. Legitimately speaking, in patch 1.0, there was no other healer. Natasha was the only existing one, and I say that mainly because the only other healer that existed in the game was Bailu, and she's a 5-star, so nobody had her unless you either got really lucky or you wailed. It would be no exaggeration to say that back then, Natasha was a character that you must have had built, otherwise you couldn't clear any of the endgame content, and to a certain extent some parts of the main story, because yes, the game is supposed to be getting a little bit harder as you progress, so having a healer was really freaking useful. Beyond that, other things that I would like to highlight about her is that between her and March 7th, something that I also forgot to mention about her, they were the only two characters that could cleanse a debuff. Hence why, at times, Natasha even became better than Bailu at the healing role, which left people a bit confused. Mind you, Bailu was not bad by any means, it's just sometimes you really needed that cleanse, and Natasha was the only reliable unit, quote unquote, that could provide you said cleanse. Also, I just find it really nice that it was a cool reveal that she was the one in charge of the wildfire, even though they told us, oh, it's actually Oleg. No, it was in fact Natasha. Qingque, following the path of erudition. Element, quantum. Role, DPS. The Gamba Goblin. Qingque is a character that we get for free after completing the third stage of Forgotten Hall, the thing that we do before even Memory of Chaos. And in all honesty, she was a really nice addition into my roster. Even though I really didn't use her that much, because for context, something that I remember from back in the day, boy, I feel old every time I say that, but a lot of people would tell you, oh, Qingque is great, but if you don't have her idol on 4, it's not really worth building her, because that is what gives her her follow-up attack, but it's also just chance. So I don't know. I did genuinely enjoy using this character whenever I got the chance. But sometimes it was a little bit discouraging hearing the internet be like, "Oh, you shouldn't be building her now," especially because in the very beginning of the game, your resources are limited, and during this era of time, we didn't have the ability to pre-farm, so leveling up felt really slow. That aside, her gameplay is one of the most unique and fun things in the entire game, and I do think that she is one of the best flavor designed characters in the entire game. It's so much fun to be drawing tiles. It's a lot of fun watching her yeet a tile to oblivion, literally so freaking strong, to the point that it causes massive damage on the enemy. And just her lore and everything was really intriguing and really fun. You know what? I'm just gonna shamelessly plug, but I even made like a video over analyzing the hell out of Qingque, and she's great. Like, legitimately speaking, I cannot stop talking about how cool of a character she is. And if you haven't learned more about our lazy little diviner, you definitely should, because she is so big brain and dedicated when she actually does things that she wants to do. Honestly, a mood. The Trailblazer, following the path of preservation. Element, fire. Role, shielder kinda, and taunt, lance, forward. This is the final character from the free roster that we obtain throughout our trailblazing journey, and in all honesty, a great addition. Like I mentioned before, the introduction of the character and the way that we obtain the powers of preservation was really sick in the middle of the Cocolia fight. And in all honesty, it is something that I genuinely adore, because they made the Trailblazers kit be something more unique and different than anything that we had seen at that point. This is the first time that we get a character that is able to taunt enemies and force them to attack you in particular, which again, I do feel like it's very in flavor with what the preservation sounded like in my brain. And speaking of flavor, just the fact that we are fire in the middle of the eternal winter, fighting Cocolia with the Stellaron, trying to freeze the entire world, being the flame of the wildfire, just absolutely peak content. It was also really nice to have the Trailblazer being a fire element character, in particular because once we reach the Xianzhou, we start seeing more enemies with the fire attribute, meaning that it's an easier and better transition going from the destruction Trailblazer into the preservation one. And also, back in these moments, running preservation Trailblazer was somewhat meta because again, we didn't really have any sustained characters, so being able to prevent your more squishy characters from taking damage was vital at times. Arlan, following the path of destruction. Element, lightning. Roll. He's trying his best, and I appreciate him for that. Peppy's true owner, in my opinion. Yeah, so Arlan was interesting to say the least. From what I remember, people used to say that back in the beta, Arlan was the best character in the game, and he was utterly busted. And then Hoyoverse broke his kneecaps. He got nerfed so hard to the point that he is now a meme, and just in general, he doesn't do what he's supposed to do. He doesn't do that much damage. He doesn't benefit out of being low health, and just as a whole, I feel like he just got poorly statted because he has such little defense in general and not even that much high of like an HP threshold. So I know that he's meant to take damage, but to a certain extent, it doesn't do anything in his, just like he still gets deleted. As a matter of fact, to kind of reinforce this, his Eidolon 4 is one of the things that I don't know what the original was, but I'm pretty sure that they butchered him. His Eidolon 4 says, if you get KO'd, you revive, but this only works in the first 2 turns that Arlan has. So you get your first turn, you use your E, you reduce your health, and then in that time lapse, you gotta hope that the enemy slays Arlan. Otherwise, you're out of an Eidolon. It's essentially as if you never had that Eidolon to begin with, because it's no longer active. And I needed to use the space to rant about it. He genuinely looks like a cool character. I adore him in almost every way, and mainly because he's the one that takes care of Peppy, but also just the way that he is respected at Herta's space station, because everybody calls him Big Brother Arlan. Everybody genuinely wants like the best for him. And again, he takes care of Peppy. So yeah, that's essentially my rant about Arlan. Hook, following the path of destruction. Element, fire. Roll, DPS. Who brought Klee into Star Rail? I really don't have anything in particular to say about Hook. She was there. I know she had her own companion quest, but beyond that, there really isn't anything I can truly talk about. She was a character that I Eidolon 6'd really quickly, but I didn't use because I will not deny I found her annoying because she's a child. So yeah, that is like completely biased on my end. I guess something to add onto her character is the fact that she really was one of the few options, actually not really like one of the few, the only fire DPS option we had back in those times. I'm not counting Himeko because 1, she's a 5-star standard, so it was harder to get her in particular. And secondly, Himiko wasn't the best, sadly, which I'll talk about a little bit more later. So your options were to either run Hook, run Himiko, or use a different DPS that was more suited for the opponents, which came in like a variety of different options. So yeah, I don't really have anything to say about Hook other than that. Pela, following the path of nihility. Element, Eyes, Role, Debuffer, Avid fanfic reader. I have good memories of Pela in particular, and this is gonna be a lot of biases, but it really is the way that at least I saw the game during that time. She used to be my DPS, and I know she's not meant to be, but her kit really did gaslight me into thinking she was meant to be a DPS. In all honesty though, I don't remember Pela being used that much back in the day. In particular because Harmony was just a much better path as an option during those times, and one of the main things that Pela did was that she would be able to reduce enemies' ice resistances, which was really great for herself and for other ice characters. But sadly, it's not like there were that many more options in order to boost ice damage. Your other alternatives were March 7th, which is not meant to do damage, Gepard, which is not meant to do damage, and Yanqing, which even though he does do a respectable amount of damage for the time that he came out, it still wasn't the best option because it was very SP heavy in consumption. Something that I do wish to add upon this is the fact that I did use Pela a lot, mainly because of the fact that she was able to cleanse enemy debuffs, which I feel like they didn't do the best of job showcasing it, because more often than not, they would make us see it by fighting one of the robots in Belobog. But where I think was the best place to highlight this would have been in the Xianzhou, especially because there's the Mara struck soldier and the general, which the soldier can revive and the general can heal. But if you cleanse all the soldiers' buffs that allow them to revive, the general no longer heals. And that was so good for clearing a lot of memory of chaos. That thing is what actually saved my life in so many of those clears. Sampo Koski, following the path of nihility. Element, Wind, Mr. Coldfeet. Boy oh boy, am I gonna be showing my biases back to back, because Sampo was a character that I absolutely adored. That being said, I genuinely cannot say anything about his gameplay during this time, because I never got to experience it myself. I never pulled a Sampo during the first patch, and I didn't know anybody that had Sampo that I could borrow, so therefore, I have zero context on this guy. All I know is that during this time, DOTs and just that kind of playstyle for Break Effect didn't really excel because it was not supported, and you would rather do instant damage with a big critical hit as opposed to just dealing chip damage with wind shear. Other problems that I feel like he genuinely faced is that during that time, wind wasn't really a supported element, so to speak. A lot of the in-game content, from my memory at least, used to be in regards to physical, lightning, quantum, and ice. Those are the 4 elements I remember being encouraged the most to be played. And beyond that, again, as I said, crit rate was a much more preferred playstyle. So if you were gonna use a wind DPS, it was either Sampo or Dan Heng, and you would rather use Dan Heng. Alternatively speaking, you could have just ignored the wind element and delete the enemy through a different weakness, and that was, again, a much better solution than to run any of these two characters. Technically speaking, for wind, you also had Bronya, but she's a harmony character, and in all honesty, she just really reinforced the fact that you didn't need wind. You didn't need to exploit the wind weakness to beat an enemy. But despite all the negativity, this man stole my heart when I did the Belobog quest, and the way that he is the one to end the Belobog chapter by quote-unquote speaking to the Star Rail fanbase when he's actually trying to talk to the tavern in Epsilon, which is like a hideout for the masked fools, was a beautiful touch. It definitely got me hyped for the future, and because of that, he became my most memorable character and the one that I adored, and I'll still be preaching about how much I genuinely adore Sampo Koski. As a matter of fact, I literally used a pixel art version I made of Sampo in the trash can from that one sticker that already exists in Star Rail as my like sort of pseudo proxy for whenever I stream in like those rare moons. So yeah, I have a lot of bias for this man. He's perfect. I adore him. Sushang, following the path of the hunt. Element, physical. Role, DPS. Rise Phoenix. I actually have a decent amount of things to talk about Sushang, because, again, kind of biases. She is one of the characters that I genuinely enjoyed playing a lot back in the day. In particular because she ended up becoming one of my main DPSs when I needed to clear content. In fact, there were times I had more fun playing Sushang than playing with Seele, and you probably think I'm a maniac for that, but there was just something enjoyable about being rewarded on breaking an enemy and then just unleashing massive damage, getting a lot of movement speed, and also just immediately getting another turn after using her ultimate. You know what? All of that kind of sounds very familiar. I wonder, oh wait, right, that's Super Break's whole thing. Yeah, in all honesty, Sushang was the original Super Breaker, and I genuinely feel like I'm gonna do a video about her just on this one detail, because I don't know, it just seems like it would be interesting, because I feel like Sushang should be a character that Super Break works in well. I'm not actually sure, I've never actually tried it, but if her extra damage on her E procs Super Break, that sounds really nice, and on top of that, she is physical, so building her own break effect is not a bad idea. This is something for testing. Tangents aside though, for as much fun as I had with Sushang, she did feel a little bit clunky at times, and I know people used to have some problems in that regard, especially when they couldn't match the enemy's weaknesses to whatever Sushang was requiring. And this also kind of brought up the problem of having a little bit of a diversified team, not being able to use Sushang against every possible enemy as an alternative definitely hurt her options, as opposed to someone like Seele, who could more consistently and much more effectively get extra turns and benefit out of deleting small enemies. I'm not sure what they're called, like some people call them ats, but yeah. Also, before I wrap up this segment, I try to confirm if the extra damage from the sword stance would count as super break damage. It does not, because it doesn't do any toughness reduction damage. So that kind of blew a little bit. Tingyun, following the path of the harmony. Element, lightning. Role, support and battery. Neck snap sound effect. Oh boy, finally we get to talk about Tingyun, and in all honesty, she was absolutely broken for a Harmony unit. This is the character that everybody said that you needed to have. Not only did she provide an attack buff that lasted for 3 whole turns for your team, which honestly was great, but she also was able to replenish your main DPS's ultimate over and over and over again, to a point that she massively increased your damage output. To say that Tingyun was a good unit would be an understatement. And also, just in general, from the fact that her buff lasted for 3 whole turns, this genuinely just made her very skill point positive, which a lot of teams at times would struggle, especially because they would run them with Bronya, and Bronya is very skill point heavy as a team. She honestly was a memorable character because everybody just adored her in the meta, and just as a whole, it was really nice to have Tingyun as our guide during that patch for the Xianzhou. So overall, I like this character. Also, I never really saw anybody talking about this, but that little fox that is in her splash art is so adorable, and I want one. It doesn't have anything to do with lore relevance, but it's adorable. And I just wanted to point it out because nobody, I think, I've heard talk about the little fella. Alright, we have gone over every single 4-star, and I need a small break from talking about all of them. So we're gonna do a quick intermission, because if you have reached to this point in the video, you're insane. We have been here for 40 minutes and you have listened to me yap about characters that existed long ago and about a meta that is no longer relevant. That being said, I at least have been having a lot of fun. I'm hoping that you too have been enjoying this sort of, again, trip down memory lane with a lot of biased inputs, because I experienced the game differently from you, and that is perfectly fair and normal. Again, I'm a maniac. I was using Sushang instead of Seele. Jokes aside though, making this video has been a lot of fun, and I'm hoping that you guys have been enjoying whatever this is. But I guess I want to take this time as well real quick to thank you guys a lot for all the support, all the kind words, all the amazing community that you guys are as a whole in here. We have reached 3,250 subscribers, which genuinely blows my mind. It is like something, again, that is just unbelievable. I am hoping that by the end of the year we can be at 3,500. That would be insane. But yeah, if you enjoy this sort of content, please feel free to hit that subscribe button. It helps us out a lot, and you know, it's free. It only takes a second. And if you ever feel like the type of content that I'm making, or if my quality is dropping, you are more than welcome to unsubscribe. I want to be able to improve with every video and make like newer ideas, hopefully. So, you know, just you guys being here helps me out a lot. But if you are not enjoying it, it's understandable. And it also tells me that I need to improve, or that I'm like doing things wrong. So I should be working on myself for these videos as well. So yeah, with all that being said, let us head back into the video. And again, thank you guys oh so much. Bailu, following the path of the abundance. Element, lightning. Role, healer. I summon Baby Dragon in attack mode. Bailu is the very first character from the 5 stars that I wished to talk about. And in all honesty, she was a must-have back in the day, at least in my own personal experience. Because like I mentioned before, back in the segment where we had Natasha, Bailu was the only other healer that existed in the game. We got Natasha for free, which was very much appreciated. Thank you, game devs. But the fact that there wasn't another abundance unit definitely harmed some of the endgame content that was available at the very beginning, because For context, getting to Memory of Chaos required you to have two different teams. And in endgame content, sometimes the enemies are gonna attack you, especially when we don't have really good relics yet. So that was a huge struggle. Not having another healer meant that the only other source of sustain that you had was March 7th and the Trailblazer to an extent. And that was not fun. That being said, Bailu is a 5-star, so not everybody had her, and even those who had her still got a few rough patches with her because she doesn't cleanse debuffs. And there were some enemies that were a little bit obnoxious back in the day that if you weren't able to cleanse their debuffs, it would actively harm you. The main criminal that I remember for this was definitely the Ebon Deer that could inflict rage upon your allies, and I have been pissed off against that deer for forever in the very beginning patches, so I at least remember the suffering of that. But as a whole, there really isn't anything else that I feel confident that I can add onto Bailu here, because I didn't have Bailu. As a matter of fact, I never got Bailu until I lost my 50-50 when I was going for Lingsha. It took me a year and a half to finally get Bailu and understand a little bit more how her character works, and even then I'm still confused. So yeah. Bronya Rand, following the path of the harmony, element, wind, roll, support, crit damage, go brrr. Well, what can I really say about Bronya? She was legitimately one of the most broken characters, if not the most broken character in the game at the moment of release, purely because of the fact that she could advance forward your allies, which is really insane, and she increased all crit damage, which was the only true meta back in the day. So therefore, she was a must-have for multiple teams. As a matter of fact, I still remember that nearly everybody, when they were aiming to that 300 out of 300 normal warps, everybody was saying, I'm gonna get Bronya. I don't have Bronya yet, so I'm gonna get Bronya. Oh, I already have Bronya, but I really would like another Eidolon for Bronya. And we have like a roster of 7 characters that each have their own benefits and their own little things that definitely benefit them a lot. But everybody wanted Bronya because it was needed. I wanted Bronya because I didn't have her and I needed her for some of my teams. And I had to use the redeem to finally get Bronya. And she was great. I stopped using her eventually because I much preferred the Nihility game style. But she was an amazing unit, and I can see why people adore her so much. Also, she has like 100% crit rate, which is kind of insane, but then you remember she's not a DPS, and her basic attacks barely do any damage, and you're like, you know what, that's balanced, but still, kind of an insane little buff to just have for the sake of meme teams. Clara, following the path of destruction. Element. Physical, roll, counter DPS, I guess? Mr. Zverog is an MVP. I have a lot of fun memories of playing Clara. I'm not gonna lie, she was a character that I just genuinely adored the moment that I saw her, because we have big mechanic robot father, and I don't know, just Mr. Zverok's voice always felt great, and I love every single one of Clara's just flavor design and animations. I will again shill a video of mine because just going deep on Clara and Mr. Zverok's design was a lovely treat. And when I later learned that they were inspired by the Fate series, I was even more hyped. I barely know anything about the Fate series, but a lot of my friends genuinely do like it, so to a certain extent, I kind of just carried on the hype by proxy. Additionally, I don't know why, but playing a counter playstyle was enjoyable to me. There's like a sort of part in my brain where I'm just like, oh yes, hit me and then you're gonna take abusive amounts of damage. Just sounded very entertaining and very comical. I don't know. Maybe I am insane. I know that my sort of playstyles don't really fit with the norm of most people, but she brought me so much fun when I was playing the game. I was also struggling and being on panic attacks all the time because I remember I would constantly have to heal Clara with Natasha because otherwise I would be cooked. And there were moments where I even had to shuffle around the team a little bit in order to make sure that Clara would survive. And one of the teams that I still remember using from time to time was Gepard, Natasha, so double sustain. Then came in Clara and Sushang. And that was one of my iconic teams. That was one of the teams that actually was able to clear a decent amount of content. Not everything, since I don't think I actually reached Memory of Chaos 10, which was the highest level of Memory of Chaos back in the day, until a few patches later. But it was still fun to be playing with all these characters. Gepard, following the path of the preservation. Element, eyes, roll, shielder, and in all honesty, punching bag. He tries his best at drawing. I'm just gonna start off this segment by saying that this is gonna be the most biased segment of the entire video because I adore this character with a passion. The fact that this was my first ever 5-star and that I played with him through so much content is definitely what is influencing my takes on this. I remember he appeared on my screen and I was upset, and then somebody on my Twitch stream said he's essentially Zhongli, and then I was so happy and he popped off and did amazing ever since. In fact, to kind of just showcase to you all how biased I am, long ago, one of my first videos on like the quote-unquote perfectly designed series that I haven't continued and I probably should at some point, I was talking about some characters that I thought were, you know, properly designed, and I even gave like different categories and such of characters that I enjoyed in certain perspective and in other perspective not, and yada yada yada. But after talking through the categories, I spoke about 3 characters in particular, and one of these was Gepard, and I mentioned why I adored him in almost every possible way, from his voice lines, the way that he is, and such, that if I go into detail, this video is going to be way longer than it is, so just watch that video to understand. But in all honesty, Gepard was the only other sustained character, aside from Bailu, that you could obtain, and he was the second choice that you wanted to get for a healer if that is what you were looking for. If you didn't get Bailu, you were hoping for Gepard in order to try to clear the super endgame content, and even then it was a bit of a struggle because you had to farm defense pieces, but at the same time it wasn't the worst because you were also farming for the lightning set, and the lightning set was really useful on Serval, and it was also useful on a character that would be coming up next in Jing Yuan. So if you had Gepard, it also made those Caverns of Corrosion a little bit more effective to farm. I know you could also farm them for the Preservation Trailblazer, but I have, at least again, bias. My memories are just farming for Gepard in that case. Himeko, following the path of erudition. Element, fire. Roll, DPS. I need some of her coffee. There really isn't much that I remember about Himeko other than, well, as previously stated, there were problems with her as a character that was more than anything due to how the meta worked, because back then we didn't have pure fiction, and Himeko's place to shine is pure fiction. Everywhere else, she was mediocre at best. For as confusing as it might be for someone that didn't get to live these moments or join after Pure Fiction released, Himeko with Herta were considered to be on the bottom tier of all tier lists, alongside with like other characters that we have definitely mentioned and will be mentioning a little bit in the future, foreshadowing. However, it was still enjoyable to have Himeko, even if you didn't use her that much, because she and Herta were really fun to be farming the calyxes for materials. In particular, there's one in Jarilo VI that just happens to have both fire and ice weaknesses, so you just make this little blender that goes brrrr and clear that content super quickly. So yeah, that was enjoyable. That one is one of the moments that I had a lot of fun just watching the game play itself. But beyond that, meta-wise, Himeko wasn't on the map at all, because erudition back then, I also forgot to kind of mention that, was just a mediocre path at best. God, I feel bad talking about Himeko that way, especially because she is a member of the Astral Express. So yeah, it pains me to say all this, but it is at least what I do remember. Welt, following the path of the Nihility. Element. Imaginary? Yes, I'm gonna make this an exception for all the intros that I have done. He is, at the moment in time, in patch 1.0, the only character in all of Star Rail that had the imaginary element as its attacks. I'm not sure how to call them, but just, yeah, he was the only character able to inflict imaginary element damage in the entire game. He was lonely, and that I feel is what made him really interesting. For context, also, his role was somewhat supportive. He mainly wanted to debuff enemies, and mainly through either slowing them down or amplifying a little bit of like the party's damage. But he also kind of acted more as a DPS, of so to speak. I don't remember people trying to build him as a support, and much less as a pseudo sustain character, because right now he is a pseudo sustain character, which is confusing but also great. Also, his first appearance where he bonks us in the head was amazing, and when they later confirmed that he is not an XP of Welt Yang from Honkai Impact 3rd, but actually the Welt Yang of Honkai Impact 3rd, everybody lost their mind, because this guy is meant to be super strong. And while I do not know the entire lore of Honkai Impact 3rd, I do know that he is one of the characters that people renown to be as one of the strongest, and he has like the Hersher of the Void powers. I'm not aware of the Void, but he has like, his staff is really, really strong. That's what I remember, and I'm gonna correct myself on like the whole previous thing just in case, but you know, with like a little text message bubble there. But he is the character that everybody loved to see, and also really did bring me up to the hype. I also felt like because he was from another universe, that is the only reason why he was an imaginary type, and that later gets disproved a couple patches later, if not like the patch immediately afterwards. So yeah, as a whole, he was an enjoyable character to play with. While I didn't have him, some of my friends did in fact own him, and I would constantly borrow him for the sake of, I need to use imaginary damage because there's no other way for me to use it. And I don't know, just overall pretty good. The only thing that I will admit I had a gripe with his release is the fact that you have this individual wielding the power of black holes, yet he did no damage, because he was meant to be, more than anything, a supportive unit. So that was odd, because, you know, we have other characters doing massive damages, and then there's Grandpa here, and he didn't do it. I don't know, maybe I'm just rambling on a little bit weird. I do not know how to like get myself out of like this spiel of sentences, so I'm just gonna say, yeah, I adored him. Confusing, but I adored him. Yanqing, Following the path of the hunt, element, eyes, roll, DPS, crit rate overload. Alright, we are finally going over Yanqing, and this one, I will admit, also has some bias behind them, because like I said before, Gepard was on my team, therefore I did have an easier time using this character than most people. One of the big flaws that Yanqing has, as many of you guys probably know, is the fact that if he gets hit, he loses his buff that allows him to do more damage, allows him to use his follow-up attack, and gives him more crit rate. And that, losing that is very freaking bad. Additionally speaking, something else that I want to add, and this is my own rant at the AI back in the day, the AI didn't help Yanqing's case in him being a good unit, because on top of you having the problems of if this child got sneezed on, he lost his buff, characters that you would normally want to play him with, such as Bronya and Tingyun, would be more suited to be ran in a different team, like with Seele, or alternatively speaking, because I know some of you guys only play on auto mode Yanqing was stupid, and auto mode Tingyun was also dumb, and I need to rant about this so much, and I'm so happy that I get the chance now. But the main thing is, back in the day, Tingyun would spam her skill, which would leave Yanqing with no skill points to use, and therefore he wouldn't be able to refresh his buff to get the crit rate. Because yes, if you not only do you lose the buff if you get hit, you would also lose it if you didn't use his skill once. So this child was very skill point hungry, especially with how fast he was. You would often run out of skill points so freaking quickly, and that was detrimental to his case. And then having the dumb AI eat it up, and this child deciding to attack even when he has skill points, was one of the things that frustrated me to no end. And I'm pretty sure that also gave him a bad reputation, on top of, again, the restriction of needing a shielder. But me having Gepard, I enjoyed using him. He was fun. He high rolled a lot of freezes for me, which I'm very thankful for. I didn't get to clear any endgame bosses with him or anything like super major, but I did have fun with him. And I feel like a lot of the things were not necessarily exaggerated. Again, a lot of the criticism that people gave for the meta for Yanqing was valid, without excluding all the angry comments and harassing comments to people that, like, I don't know, there were a lot of angry people at Yanqing back in the day, like way too angry, because he's a 5-star and he wasn't the best. So yeah, like all the constructive criticism of like, oh, these are the flaws with Yanqing, they were valid, but he wasn't as bad as I think people were saying. Again, this is also just a Gepard gamer's perspective, so I could just be completely wrong. I had an easy time with him. This is completely biased. I just wanted to make that out. Like, I just want to make that completely clear. I'm also fumbling my words so much on this segment because I do not know how to get myself out of this bias-infused speech. So, yeah. In short, I had fun. Sadly, not a good character. Also, before I end this segment, I just want to say, I loved Freeze as a mechanic. So, that's also another bias right there. Freezes were so enjoyable for me to abuse. And yeah, that doesn't really help my case, but I didn't mention that. Seele, following the path of the hunt. Element, quantum, roll, main DPS. It's my turn now. Seele was a really enjoyable character, and I feel like she is the best way that Star Rail could have began their first ever patch. Mainly because the fact that Seele fundamentally breaks the concept of turn-based gameplay was very enticing for a lot of people. Hearing that there's a character that if they slay an enemy, they get another turn was something that a lot of people found to be really enjoyable, including myself. There's also the fact that there was an achievement that you can get with her that I feel like also low-key encouraged people to pull for her, because a lot of people would borrow Seele's in order to just, clear content with in Calyxes or Caverns of Corrosion. And just seeing the fact that you can get an achievement for just playing the game with the 5-star character, I don't know, it just felt rewarding. Nevertheless, as the very first limited 5-star character, she really killed it. She was amazing to clear content with. To be fair, again, a lot of the enemies were tailored to benefit Seele sales, since a lot of the enemies were just quantum weak enemies. Also, again, because I feel like this is also something that should be mentioned, the fact that she is not necessarily connected to Honkai Impact 3rd, but she is a reference to a character in Honkai Impact 3rd, was something that would definitely help her sales to excel. Similarly with Bronya, because both of those characters, from what I can tell, are in a relationship in Honkai Impact 3rd. So having them be in the first major patch as the protagonist definitely helped hook people from the other series into this new series. Beyond that, I don't know anything else that I can add onto this, aside from one quick little fact that I thought it was hilarious. If you look at Seele's scythe, it is actually just a makeshift weapon. The handle for the scythe is one of the muskets / rifles that the Silvermane Guard use, and I thought that was so hilarious, but also so on brand for what they were facing in the underground. So 10 out of 10 in design there. General Jin Yuan, following the path of erudition. Element, lightning, roll, main DPS. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. I feel bad for General Jin Yuan's release. Mind you, he wasn't awful, but there were a couple problems with the way that he played that made his debut clunky. The Lightning Lord being able to be interrupted by this one little robot's shield was unethical. The fact that his shield could tank a multi-hit move by the Lightning Lord felt really bad at the beginning. And additionally, if Jin Yuan got stunned or enraged or any kind of hard crowd control, the Lightning Lord would not attack. And that was awful. That sometimes made the game feel miserable. And as much as I want to defend him, it's just things that happen with his existence. On top of that, there were a lot of lightning resistant enemies, making it hard for you to actually use him in content. So that was a big problem. And on an even extra note on that, Serval also was a lightning erudition character, which I wouldn't say she was better, but a lot of people were saying, oh, why should I pull for him if I already have a lightning erudition character? And she's cheaper to build because, yes, leveling up traces for Jin Yuan was more expensive because he's a 5-star. So there was a lot of moments of contention there that I do remember vividly. Yet I still adore playing him. And one of the things that I am very happy about, I know that a lot of the things that I've already mentioned were like negative, but the fact that Jin Yuan players were rewarded patch after patch after patch with not necessarily buffs, but like, yeah, I mean, yeah, they're kind of buffs. They got a new set, they got Sparkle. I don't remember what else they got, but a lot of them, like, there were many things that just kept making Jing Yuan better and better and better, and I'm so happy for them. On top of them having the most busted light cone that existed during the time, because Jing Yuan's light cone was so strong. I don't remember exactly what it did, but I know that it raised like crit damage and like follow-up attack damage. So yeah, 10 out of 10. Like, genuinely enjoyed seeing him throughout those moments, even though I didn't use him. I'm gonna be completely honest. I pulled for him, and I didn't have enough money to use him, so I fell onto that moment of I would rather build Serval, and I felt so bad leaving him behind. I used him after I finally finished some more endgame content and such, but I always felt bad that I left him behind. So I do wanna say that he deserves justice, and that I'm happy that there are more things that are supporting him as the patches have gone by. And with that, we have gone over every single character, and that was a lot. I just realized how much time I have been recording this video, and the editing is gonna be suffering. So I apologize to the me in the future taking care of this. That being said, I could talk more about this patch, but I feel like that would be too excessive. So to kind of just make a quick TLDR about the simulated universe, it was fun at first, and then it became a chore. It was cool to just do this segment that would give you Stellar Jades, and I believe one free pass a week from the very beginning. So that was all fine and dandy. Having to do it twice a week in the best case scenario, yeah, it just didn't end up sitting right with me after a couple weeks. So that's just one of the things that I can say about the first patch. Also, it was a little bit dry in the beginning because everybody was just rushing through content, or they, you know, like they needed time for players to actually go throughout the story before dropping an actual event. And I believe the first one was like that boxing match event, or like the boxing ring event. So that was enjoyable. It was a cool combat based event. I don't remember many of the other ones though. I just know that that one was one of the permanent staying ones. But yeah, I'm convoluting myself. I'm dragging this longer than I should. So let us move on to the conclusion. So yeah, that is everything that I guess I wanted to talk about in regards to the very first patch of Storial. I know that this might be a little bit all over the place. I'm not gonna lie, I didn't really know how to structure it for the very first patch. I do have it better structured for when I cover more in the future of Retrospective. So that is something that is definitely not the best beginning, but it's gonna get better. Kind of like Star Rail. So I'm being optimistic with myself. That being said, I really do hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope that you enjoyed going through this trip down the very beginning patch of the game that we enjoy, that some of us have been welcomed into a community, and that have been able to find others that have fun with the game, enjoy the game, or just as a whole feel like they can sort of reach a little bit of escapism through the game. And I mentioned that one in particular because I will admit that video games were an escapism for me, especially during times like these, which is the holiday season. Which, by the way, happy belated Thanksgiving to you guys. I'm hoping everything has been treating you great and lovely. I'm hoping that you guys just had fun if you are in the United States with like Thanksgiving. Otherwise, if not, still, I'd hope that you had a fantastic day and a fantastic week. So, yeah, you all are absolutely wonderful. I genuinely appreciate each and every single one of you all. And yeah, if you haven't already, please feel free to hit that subscribe button if you wish. It's free. It only takes a second, and at any point, you can always unsubscribe. want to be able to improve with the quality of my videos and just more shenanigans with different kinds of like video topics. And you all have made it feel great to be in this space of YouTube and just in Star Rail in general. So yeah, I just want to say that. I hope you're having a wonderful rest of your day, night, morning, whatever time zone you're currently watching this video at. And I'll see you all in the next one. Bye bye.